Kakadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yoma daf Amud Aleph is 58:1. We were going to ask the following question: Eitvei Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka le Rabbi Yami. Yeah, so Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka asked Rabbi Yami. Yeah, it says ve'otzi et kol hapar. You're going to take out the entire par michutz machane, outside of the machane, outside of the camp. So when it says ve'otzi et kol hapar michutz machane, so you see that even after the shechita, it's still called a par. So if after the slaughtering it's still called a par, what's the problem if the Kohen Gadol will pass away that another Kohen Gadol cannot come and take from that par? It's still called a par. So answers the Gemara, sheyotzi et kulo. Says no. Even though when the bull is going to be slaughtered, it's not called a par. Here the kavanah is that you're going to take it outside of the machaneh, the entire thing, which means everything which is left over is going to be taken out. Then it's written, right? What about the parachatat and sira chatat? So therefore, here you see that it's still considered a par and a said, a bull and a said, a he-goat, even after it was slaughtered. Which means, remember, one more time, what happened? What happened was that they slaughtered the animal, and then they collected the blood, and the Kohen Gadol died. So the Kohen Gadol, since he died, is someone on Kippur, yeah? So since the Kohen Gadol died, what happens is that we have a problem. The problem is that now you have a new Kohen Gadol that's a substitute, but now he cannot take it from the par because the first Kohen Gadol died. So he needs to bring a new par. So the Gemara asks, why does he need to bring a new par? This par, this bull or this he-goat, even after slaughtering, is still called a bull. So he could still bring it. So Rav Papa says, Be'oru basaru peresh techule alma lo plige. Here we're talking about the skin, the flesh, or the peresh, which is like the intestines. According to everybody, nobody argues in such a case. Right? That what we're talking about in such a case, that it's called parachatat v'sira chatat, even though it was already slaughtered. Ki plige, when is the machloket only to do with the blood? Meaning, to do with the skin, or the flesh, or the intestines, even after it was slaughtered, it's still considered good. It's still considered alive, or it's still considered a par or a sayyid. But the question here, though, is, what about the blood? The blood, once you accepted the blood from this animal, is it considered okay or not? So, more savar dam ikre par. One of them holds that also the dam is called the par, the bull, and more savar that the dam is not called the par. So Amar Ravashi says, Mistabra kimanda Amar, it's more logical to say that dam ikre par, that the blood is called the par. It says in a pasuk, Bezot yavo Aaron el kodesh bepar ben bakar, right? And with this, Aaron will come to the kodesh with par ben bakar. Atu bekarne me'aile. He says what? The Kohen Gadol is going to bring in the par to the kodesh kodashim with his horns. Ela bedamo, but rather it's with the blood. The kari le par, and it's still called a par, right? Ve'idach, in the other amura, bamehu shar Aaron lavol kodesh. With what is Aaron able to come to the kodesh inside? Only befar ben bakar lechatat, which means the pasuk is not talking about the actual coming inside of the kodesh kodashim, but rather how's he coming inside of there? So in order for him to come inside of there, he has to bring a par chai, a live bull, okay, and then he has to slaughter it for a chatat, and then he has to do all the avodot. So it comes out that the par which is mentioned in the pasuk is not the blood of the par, but the par mamash. So says the Gemara, why don't you take it out from the fact that it says the chatat shemetu be'aleahi, that it's a chatat that the owners died. If you have a sin offering and the owners die, what happens? It gets killed. Why? Because can somebody else bring a sin offering for you? Nobody could bring a sin offering for you, and you can't bring it as a nidava. Remember, a nidava is a present. You're not going to bring a present, a sin offering. A sin offering, kiresid, I sinned against you, Hashem. Well, that's a present that you sinned against me. That's a chutzpah. So you cannot bring a chatat. So therefore, chatat shemetu be'alea, a chatat, a sin offering that the owners died. That's it, kaddish, right? Limitazla, it goes to its death. We don't actually bring it. So Amale Ravin bar Ada lerava, says Ravin bar Ada to Rava, right? Amrei talmidach amar Rav Amram. The Talmidim, your Talmidim said in the name of Rav Amram, chatat siburhi, velo lemitazla. He says no. When is it that a chatat goes to its death? If it's a chatat yachid, if it's an individual sin offering. But if it's a chatat tzibur, if it's a communal sin offering, it doesn't go to its death. Which means that only by a yachid, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, by an individual, that it goes to its death. But if it's the entire congregation didn't die. So even if you have a few individuals, it doesn't matter, but you still have the congregation. So the congregation to bring. Okay?
Yeah.
The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah in Temurah, right? Amar lo Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Meir to Tanakama, Valo par Yom Kippurim v'chavito Kohen Gadol uPesach korban yachidu tochet hatzishva v'tatuma. He says, you see from here that it's not proper to come into saying, right, that it's a korban yachid. It's not going to push off the Shabbat and the Tuma. But what about the par Yom Kippurim? The part of the Yom Kippurim of the Kohen Gadol and the Chavite Kohen Gadol and the Korban Pesach, each one of these are considered a Korban Yachid. And even though it's considered a Korban Yachid, it pushes off Shabbat and Tumah, which means usually, what pushes off Shabbat, what overrides Shabbat and Tumah? Only a Korban Sibur. However, the Korban Yachid of an individual does not push off the Shabbat and the Tumah. But here it does. So says the Gemara, Lami Klal, the Ikalaman Damar, the Tzibur is not because there's somebody that holds that it's a Tzibur, and since it belongs to the Tzibur, that's why it pushes off Shabbat and it overrides also Tumah. So says the Gemara, and according to your reasoning, Diktani, as we learned in a Braita, Amalo Rabbi Yaakov, says Rabbi Yaakov, Parhelem Davar Shel Tzibur. What about the Parhelem Davar Shel Tzibur? Yeah, he says, Usirei Avodah Kochavim. Parhelem Davar Shel Tzibur is a sacrifice that what happens if the Tzibur, they didn't know that something was prohibited. They made a mistake. And they went and they did an Avirah. And once they did an Avirah, they didn't realize the problem. So because of that, they have to bring a Par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur. Helem Davar quiere decir Ne'elam, escondido, right? I can't see it. We didn't realize what happened. So we did an Avirah, but we didn't realize. So that's an entire Tzibur, not an individual. The entire Tzibur. So you have to bring a Par Helem Davar Shel Tzibur. Or Sirei Avodah Kochavim. Asir Chatat, if somebody went and they did Avodah Zarah. Right? That, for example, if a Tzibur came and they did Avodah Zarah, they would have to come and they would have to bring the sacrifice. Or a Korban Chagiga. Chagiga is the what we bring for the Shalosh Regalim. Yeah, for the 3 Chagim. Right? The Korban Tzibur, because all these things are Korban Tzibur. And it's not to push off, not Shabbat and not Tumah. Okay? So says the Gemara, Miklal di'ikal amandamar diachid. So you see from here that there's a Tanakama that holds that all these things are considered Korbanot Yachid. Ella, but rather, according to Tanakama, Kamahadale, he went and he answered in the Shamed Kama that he heard that a Korban Tzibur is Dochet Shabbat Tumah, a communal sacrifice is going to override Shabbat. So that's why you could bring it on Shabbat plus Tumah. Famalo Rabbi Meir says Rabbi Meir, Korban Yachid Klalahu. The Korban Yachid is like a general rule. What's a general rule? How do you make a general rule out of it? What about the Yom Kippurim Chavite Kohen Gadol? It's a Korban Yachid, and still it's going to push off Shabbat and it's going to push off Tumah. Right? V'amalo Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Yaakov, Korban Tzibur is a klalahu. Are you going to tell me also Korban Tzibur is a general rule? Meaning like this. What did we just say before? We just said before that there are 2 general rules. Korban Yachid does not push off Shabbat and it does not push off Tumah. Why? It's an individual. Korban Tzibur, the general rule is, it does override Shabbat and it overrides Tumah. Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Tumah was permitted in the Tzibur. Well, that means if the entire Tzibur become Tameh, you're still allowed to bring the sacrifice. Why? Because it was permitted in the entire Tzibur. It's impossible that the entire Tzibur is going to become Tameh and therefore we're not going to do anything. No. In the entire Tzibur are Tameh, you bring it. So the question is, are you going to tell me that it's such a general rule? It's a klala? He says, it's also Korban Tzibur, and it doesn't push off Shabbat, and it doesn't push off Tumah. So here I gave you a case of a Korban Yachid. For example, Korban Pesach. It's of an individual. It's not the Tzibur. Every individual has an obligation to bring Korban Pesach. The only thing is, usually we bring it as a family. That's why in Pesach, everyone's in the families together. Right? Because when we learn Pesachim, it's all supposed to be subscribed to the same family. So the head of the family, the Kavesed of the family, is the one in charge, and then every single person is beneath him. And then they come and they bring the korban, but it's still an individual. It's not a communal sacrifice. And there, it does override Shabbat, and it overrides Tumah. So that's against the general rule of Korban Yachid, of an individual. Then you have Korban Tzibur, for example, Chagiga, or Par Elem Devar Shel Tzibur, or Sidei Avodah Kochavim, and this is a communal sacrifice. And here, it does not push off Shabbat, and it doesn't push off Tumah. So what's going on over here? Ela, but rather, Nekotai klala biyadecha. But rather, you have to get this general rule in your hand. Kol shezmano kavua, anything which is a zman kavua, a fixed time, dochet haShabbat v'Tumah. It's going to push off Shabbat and Tumah, v'afilu biyachid. Even in the individual sacrifice. So Korban Pesach has a zman kavua. We don't push off the Korban Pesach. This year, we would have brought it in the Korban Pesach on Shabbat. Why? Because when was Pesach? Yeah? When was Pesach? On Motzei Shabbat. So since it was on Motzei Shabbat, Erev Pesach, we do the sacrifice. So therefore, we would have done it on Shabbat in itself. We pushes off Shabbat, right? That's what would have happened. So afilu biyachid. But if it doesn't have a fixed time, it's not going to override Shabbat or Tumah, even if it's going to be a tzibur. Why? But since it doesn't have a fixed time, bring it later. Imagine right now you've got a case that everyone went and they did Avodah Zarah. Now they didn't realize they did Avodah Zarah. So they have to bring a seed, Avodah Kochavim, or Parelem and Davash Tzibur. They did something which they're Chayavim Karet, and the entire Tzibur did it. They thought it was permitted, and then it was prohibited. So now what happens? What happens is they have to bring a sacrifice. Why do you have to bring it on Shabbat? Bring it on Sunday. Bring it on Friday. Bring it on Tuesday. Why are you going to bring it on Shabbat? It's not Zman Kavua. So since it's not Zman Kavua, it's not a fixed time, even though it's going to be a communal sacrifice, it doesn't push off Tumah. Doesn't push off Shabbat. Okay? So says the Gemara, Abaye comes and he's going to ask the following question. Imagine right now you have a Parve Sayid of Yom Kippurim. So you have the bull. Remember, the Kohen Gadol is going to bring a bull, and he's also going to bring a he-goat. Okay, he brings, right, the two he-goats. One of them he throws off the cliff, the Sayid La'azazel, right? And the other one is the he-goat that he leaves by us. And then he brings a par. So the par V'Sayid Shel Yom Kippurim She'avdu, that it got lost. So it got lost. So imagine, he separates, he's got his bull, he's got his he-goat, and then, boom, they ran away, it got lost. We don't know where it is. Okay, fine. So what does he do? He frees Shachirim Tachteim. So he took a substitute. He took another one, and now he's going to use another one. Kulam Yamutu. He says, Halakha Moshe Misinai is that what happens if you found them? If you found the original ones, they have to go to their death. Right? The same halakha would apply. See, they have a Kochavim. Shavdu v'ifri Shachirim Tachteim. Kulam Yamutu. All of them are going to go to its death. These are the words of Yehuda, which means that the second that you separated them, and now they got lost, you separated another one. You're going to bring those ones, and then they found the original ones. Those ones have to die because you can't do anything with it, right? Because since it was supposed to be as a chatat, that's it, and they already have another one. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say, Yir'u ad she'istavu. No, you don't just come and starve them to death and they die. You let them graze. When they graze, they're going to continue grazing until they get a blemish. How many times does it happen they have a blemish? A fox comes, a wolf, a lion, whatever it is, until they get a blemish. Once they get a blemish, right? Ad she'istavu, they have a mum. Now you could redeem them. Once you redeem them, now you're going to sell it. And then the money will come and we'll have Kedusha. And the money goes as a nedava, as a present to the Bet HaMikdash. She'en chatat tzibur meta, because chatat tzibur does not go to its death. So that means according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar and Shimon, chatat of a tzibur does not go to its death. It's only chatat yachid go to its death, of an individual, not of the communal. Okay? But according to Rabbi Yehuda, also, they both go to its death. So Amalei, so Rava comes and he says, Tabaye, my par. What is the par that we're referring to? We're not talking about the par of the Kohen Gadol, but rather par elem davar shel tzibur, the par of the chatat of the tzibur, right? Why? It says over here, because this behemet is a korban tzibur, and that's why according to him we said that. So says the Gemara, what are you talking about? It said v'ashel Yom Kippurim katani. We said par v'sa'ir shel Yom Kippurim. If you say the words par v'sa'ir shel Yom Kippurim, it's of Kippur. It's not of a tzibur. So he says no. V'ashel Yom Kippurim katani. So he says ki katani de sa'ir. It says par pasek. Where's pasek? He's over there. Yeah, pasek. What does pasek mean? Make a efsek, a stop. Par. Which par? Helem davar shel tzibur. Then it says the Sa'id of Yom Kippurim. It's not the par and the Sa'id of Yom Kippurim. It's the par, pasek, and then it's also Sa'id of Yom Kippurim. Okay? Mm-hmm. So ask the Gemara, Ve'atanya, we learned in the Braita, par shel Yom Kippurim, Sa'id shel Yom Kippurim, shavdu v'ifri shachirim tachtein. When you have the bull of Yom Kippurim, or you have the he-goat, right, of the Yom Kippur that got lost, and then they separated another one, Kulam yamutu, they're all going to die. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say, you're going to let it graze until it becomes tameh, until it gets a mum. And once it gets a mum, imachru, you're going to sell it. And the money is going to go for the nedava to the Bet HaMikdash. Shen chatat tzibur meta, but it's not going to go. And a chatat of tzibur is not going to die. So says the Gemara, you see from here, right, that this is talking about mefurash, a part of Yom Kippurim. Because here, the Braita said it mefurash. Par shel Yom Kippurim, the Sa'ir shel Yom Kippur. It said both. Before, in the previous Braita, it only just said par v'sayir shel Yom Kippurim. So we wanted to play around. We wanted to make a pasek par and then sayir shel Yom Kippurim. Here it says mefurash par shel Yom Kippurim v'sayir shel Yom Kippurim. So says the Gemara, lo tema. Don't say she'en chatat tzibur meta. Don't say that there's no chatat tzibur, chatat of a public that goes to its death. Elaima, but rather we have to say she'en chatat shutafin meta. There's no chatat of shutafin, of partners that go to its death, right? Because basically the partnership, since there's a partnership, that's why it doesn't go to its death. So here we're all partners in it. Okay, so that's what it says over here. The reason why the part of Yom Kippurim does not go, it says it does not go to its death, is because it's a par chatat of the shutafim, because it belongs to all the kohanim as well, because it's mechapen on all the kohanim. So therefore, even though the kohanim are not considered a tzibur, because kohanim are not the tzibur is the majority of the klal Yisrael. However, though, they're considered shutafim, partners. So once they're partners, that's why it doesn't go to its death. Umay nafkamina. What's an nafkamina? Whether you're going to say par Yom Kippurim is considered of chatat shutafim or of a tzibur. So says the Gemara, telo maitu kohanim par beorah. Because the kohanim themselves, they will never bring a par helem davash tzibur if they were over an isur of karet, according to the thing. Because even though, right, the shevet, right, is considered a tzibur, right, but he comes and he says over here, the kohanim are not considered a shevet. That means a full shevet are considered a tzibur, but the kohanim are not considered a shevet. The kohanim are within a shevet of Levi, but they're not a shevet themselves. So that's why you don't bring the entire thing on them, because it's not a shevet. Tashama, we also learned in a Braita. We're going to try to bring another question against Rava, right? That he holds that Par Yom Kippurim is Korban Tzibur. Tabai Rabbi Elazar, but Rabbi Elazar came and he wanted to ask the following question. Nuna Mubet, 50b. Okay? Nuna Mubet. Ledivre Aomer, according to the one that says that Yom Kippurim is considered a Korban Yachid, right? That Yom Kippurim is considered a Korban of a Yachid of an individual. Oset Tmuna or en Oset Tmuna. Does it make a substitute or doesn't it make a substitute? Which means, right, does it make a substitute like any other type of a korban yachid, like of an individual sacrifice, or doesn't it make it? Which means like this, a korban yachid makes a tmurah, because let's say the bala korban, the owner of the korban comes and he says, on a regular animal, this animal is going to be a tmurah, a substitute for the other animal. So what happens is the behemat chulin gets the kiddusha, and they both say kadosh. Yeah, that means the guy, he thought it was a smart aleck. Smart aleck like this. He sees an animal, and this animal is a very, very good animal. And it's going to be a korban. Afterwards, he says, you know what? Am I crazy? Why am I giving such a good animal as a korban? I have the other animal beside it, which is less. So what do? This animal is the tmurah, as a substitute for that one. Says the Torah, Vayahu tmurato yeh kodesh. Both of them now become kodesh. They both become holy. They both become holy. He has to bring both of them now. Yeah.
In order, because he wants to take advantage.
Does he want to take advantage? So both of them. Now that only happens to do with a korban yachid, with an individual one. A korban tzibur or a korban of shutafim, korban of a communal one or of partners, do not make tmurah. Because if one of them said tebe mazu chulin or whatever it is, it does not get it. It does not get the kedusha, which means that one stays kadosh, the other one does not even start. Why? Because it's a communal. The communal cannot affect on the tmurah. It's only the individual that he can make a tmurah. Okay? So says the Gemara, Lav miklal di'ikalaman de tzibur. Are we not then trying to come and teach you that according to Shitat Rabbi Elazar, right, he's saying that the Par Yom Kippurim is considered Korban Tzibur? Because since he said according to the Mandamar that says Par Yom Kippurim is Korban Yachid, so isn't it considered like a Tzibur? Right? So says the Gemara, Lo, miklal di'ikalaman Mandamar de Shutafim. Really, we're talking about Shutafim. Right? What are Shutafim? Partners. Okay? Gufa by Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar came and he asked the following question. The Divrei Omer Par Yom Kippurim Korban Yachid, according to the Mandamar that says Par Yom Kippurim is a Korban Yachid, Oset Tmurah or en Oset Tmurah? Can it make a Tmurah or cannot not make a Tmurah? So says the Gemara, Maika Mibaile. Right? What's the question then? Ibatar Magdish Azlinan. If it's that we're going after the one that's doing the Magdish, which means the one that's making the Ekdesh, we're going after him. Or Ibatan Mikaper Azlinan. Are we going after the one that means the Kapara? Which means, one more time, what happened exactly? The Par Yom Kippurim, is it, right? It's considered like a Korban Yachid of an individual. The question is, does it make a Tmurah or not? Do we say that we go after the one that's consecrating it? So therefore, it should be, right, the Kohen Gadol. So if it's Kohen Gadol, it should become an individual, and therefore you could make a Tmurah. Or do we say batar mitkaper azina? Do we go that it goes after all the kohanim? So now if it goes after the kohanim, meaning like this, who's the one that brings the par of the Kohen Gadol? The Kohen Gadol. Who's it atoning for? The Kohen Gadol and all the kohanim. Right? That's why when he brings the par, he says, Ana Hashem hatat yavi, right? And then he says, right, so the first one is going to be for him, right? But then it's going to be for also kol echava kohanim, alam kodoshecha, right? It's going to be on all bnei Aaron, it's going to be on everybody. So do you go after the one that's consecrating it, or the one that's mitkaper, which is basically the kohanim? So says the Gemara, Pshita de bata mitkaper azina. For sure, we're going after the ones which are getting the tomen, which are the kohanim. Ta'amar Rabbi Avu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, but says Rabbi Avu, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hamagdish Mosif Chomesh. The one that's Magdish, when he wants to redeem it, he has to add a fifth. Remember that whenever you're redeeming something, you have to add a fifth. So for example, let's say you have Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni was produce, and you want to take it up to Yerushalayim. So that produce that you want to take it up to Yerushalayim, you have to add a fifth to it. Or when you have Kodesh and you want to redeem it, you have to add a fifth to it. Rule number two, Hamitkaper ose batmura. The one that's going to be mitkaper is going to make it into a tmura. Number three, right? Number three is if somebody is going to separate truma from fruits, right? From his own fruits in order to fix his friend's fruits, the torem is zakai, right? To give the truma to any coin that he wants. And he could actually accept from the Israel another one, a little bit of a payment in order to give it to a certain coin. So basically, you get the rights to give it to whichever coin you want. You have to give it, but to whichever coin you want. So says the Gemara, right? Leolam pshitale, for sure, it's obvious that we're going after the one which is the mitkaper. The mitkaper here is obviously talking about the ones which are getting the atonement, which are the kohanim. And here's the question, the doubt: is it going to be that they're doing it bekavua, bekviyut? Are they going to have a kavara? Or maybe we're going to say that they're only mitkaprim derech agav the Kohen Gadol, which means like this. For sure, right, there's the Kohen Gadol that he's coming and he's going to give us this kviyut. But the question that they're for sure being atoned. The question is, who's the ikar? Is the ikar the Kohen Gadol and all the rest of the Kohanim are derech agav, by the way? Or do we say no, that they're all the ikar? They're all being atoned in the same time. So says the Gemara, Tashema, chomer bazevach mi batmura, vechomer batmura mi bazevach. There's a braita that says that there's a stringency by a korban behema that there's no tmura, more than another one which became consecrated that there's a tmura. And there's a stringency by the tmura from a regular korban. Chomer bazevach, what's the chumrot? The chumra of a korban has 3 chumrot more than the tmura. Number 1, shazevach noheg betzibur kiviyachid. That means there's korbanot yachid and there's korbanot tzibur. Number 2, it's dochet hashabbat v'tetuma. The zevach, which is zman kavua, which is a fixed time, it's always going to push off tumah. It's going to override tumah and override Shabbat. Number 3, oseh tmura. It also makes a tmura, which means that if you're going to make a substitute, they're both going to become holy. Mashen kem b'tumura, but by a tmura. Right? First of all, it's not by a tzibur, it's only by yachid. Number 2, it doesn't push off Shabbat or tumah. And number 3, it doesn't make another tmura. Means you cannot make a substitute of a substitute. You can only do it once. If not, it's too far away. The chomer b'tumura means zevach. The chumra of a tmura more than the zevach. Shetmura chala al balmum kavua. Tmura could even go on a balmum kavua. Okay, and then it says, ve'ena yotza lechulin, and it's not going to go to chulin ligazez v'le'aved, right? To shear or to be worked on. Mashenken b'zevach, mashenken by the zevach, right? So he comes and he says that it could, which means that you see that if during the time of the Ekdesh, it had a mum kavua, it only has kiddushat damim, and therefore when you're going to deconsecrate it, it goes to chulin completely. You could use the animal, you could do whatever you want. Meaning when you're going to redeem the animal now is not holy at all. You could do whatever you want with that. Okay? So, hai zevach echidami. What's the case of this zevach, of the sacrifice? If you're going to tell me now we're talking about a yachid, right? Midach is Shabbat v'tumah. Are you going to tell me now that it's going to push off Shabbat and tumah? Ela de tzibur, but rather it's talking about a tzibur, right? Meal said tmura doesn't make a tmura. Ela lav, obviously we're talking about the part of Yom Kippurim. It's going to override Shabbat and tumah because it has a zman kavua. They'll set tmura and it's going to make a tmura. There's korban yachidu. So Amar of Sheshat says of Sheshat, lo be'elo shel Aaron, right? We're not talking about the ram of Aaron. right? Really, we're talking about not the par, but rather the ail of the Aron, which means the ail that the Aron was bringing is for sure Kurban Yachid, right? But it has a Kavua Zman. So therefore, just like we said before, it's for sure Kurban Yachid, but it's not for everybody else. It's for him. But it's got a fixed time. So it pushes off Shabbat and Tumah. Hachinam in Sabr, it's also logical. These are the way you're going to tell me it's par, Tumah the par, right? And you're going to tell me it's a Tumah of the par. Shabbat Tumah hu de lodachia habechol makriv korban. Says 1 second. Shabbat Tumah, the Tumah is not going to push it off. But if it was during the weekday, you're for sure going to bring it on the Mizbeach. Now, Tumunat Chatati, it's a Tumunat Chatat, and Tumunat Chatat goes to its death. Remember, a substitute of a Chatat, of a sin offering, goes to its death, because you can't bring 2 sin offerings. You can't bring a present to Hashem, I sinned against you. So here, I really didn't sin, but I'm going to bring you a sin offering. Well, you're slapping in the face. I'm happy, I'm rebelling? Obviously not. So says the Gemara, no. Le'olam paro, really it's a part of the Kohen Gadol in Kippurim. My Tmuna, what does it mean Tmuna? Leshem Tmuna. It's a general term for the Tmuna, but not that really bemet it's a Tmuna. Yachi Zevach Nami Shem Zevach. You're going to say that. So then also the Zevach is just like the name of the terminology of a Zevach Korban. So says the Gemara, Shem Zevach Loktani, we didn't learn it. Why? Mimai. What's the kavanah? Midiktani chomer betmuna. What's the chomer in the tmuna? Shatmuna chal al balmum kavua. The tmuna is going to be chal on a balmum kavua. Ve'ena yotzea lechulin. It's not going to go out to chulin. So right. So he says ligazez v'leaved. Why don't we just come and we make it to shear it and we can work it? V'yisat. Now you're going to tell me the zevach is shem zevach. Va'ika you do have kiddushat haguf. So if you have kiddushat haguf, it's going to be a problem. Nunalef amudalef 51a1. So says the Gemara, Bechor Maaser dechalina balmum kavua. We're talking about Bechor Maaser, which is going to be chal, which means it's going to have kedusha even on a balmum kavua. Ve'en yotzin lechulin. That means basically, if you have a Bechor, the firstborn of an animal, or Maaser of an animal, the 10th animal, there it's going to have kedusha taguf. It's going to have kedusha on the body, even on a balmum kavua, and it's not going to go out to chulin to shear it or to work it. El Hashem zevach loktani. But rather, right, Shem Zevach, we're not talking about the Shem Zevach, right? It's not for sure it's the Zevach itself. It's a specific one. It's not just Stam in general. It's a specific type of a sacrifice. We continue Bezrat Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.